Welcome back, adventurers. In my last video, I explained how bounded accuracy works in the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. As a quick refresher, bounded accuracy is a system where the difference between attack bonuses, armor class, ability modifiers, difficulty classes, and saving throws remain relatively constant throughout the game, regardless of character level. Accuracy refers to your chance to hit something, or more generally, succeed at a task, and bounded refers to the hard limits on how well you're able to do at any task, and the difficulty class of all tasks. The upper bound of this system is 30, representing a nearly impossible task. The upper bound of player modifiers, under normal circumstances, is plus 11. Rolling a 20 on a d20 with this modifier puts the limit of a roll result at 31, which is no accident. That's the quick and dirty explanation. If you want the full thing, check out my other video on the math behind the system. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to cover why bounded accuracy was essential to the 5e design team, what it accomplishes, and the most common complaints from players on a system of bounded accuracy. Let's jump right in and answer, why is bounded accuracy in 5e? Well, bounded accuracy was born from earlier editions of the game, where numerical bonuses scaled linearly with character level. One major downside of the system was that players were limited to a narrow set of challenges that were level appropriate. Anything higher was impossibly difficult, and anything lower was not challenging at all. Additionally, the assumed increase in enemy power levels meant that players were on a treadmill, where increased power-ups didn't actually make them feel more powerful, they just kept pace with whatever tier of play they were meant to be in for their level. This unbounded design had other flaws as well, but I think they're best explored through another question. On a practical level, what does bounded accuracy accomplish in 5e? Well, to answer that, I'll be paraphrasing Rodney Thompson a lot here. Link in the description to his 2012 article on why the 5th edition was designed with bounded accuracy as a core principle. I've also included a few additional benefits of the system that the community appreciates but that weren't in Rodney Thompson's original article. Number 1. It increases the value of increasing a modifier. Difficulty, armor class, and monster accuracy don't scale with level, so a +1 bonus is and remains impactful regardless of your character's level. For example, a +1 magic item puts you 5% ahead of the assumed 65% 2-hit chance of the game's math, regardless of what tier you get it. As Rodney puts it, players see a tangible increase in their competence and how often they succeed at tasks they perform regularly. Number 2. It allows non-specialists to attempt things. Modifiers range from 0 to +11. For an example, consider a hard task with a difficulty class of 20. A novice with a +0 modifier still has a remote 5% chance of succeeding. A semi-specialist with a +5 modifier has a decent shot of succeeding, around 30% of the time. And a specialist with a +10 modifier will succeed more than half the time, 55% to be specific. Importantly, it's not a waste of time for any of the 3 characters to participate in the challenge. This is in contrast to a system where DCs that scale with players leave non-specialists no chance of succeeding. For example, a DC 35 would be totally impossible for a character in such a system unless their character were specialized to deal with that challenge. Interestingly, a stated design goal from Rodney was that specialized characters find tasks increasingly trivial, which does kind of explain how expertise exists in such a system where it seemingly breaks the system somewhat. Number 3. Monsters stay relevant. Because monsters 2-hit and AC bonuses don't have a huge variance, hordes of lower-leveled enemies remain a threat to higher-leveled players. They'll still hit sometimes, even if they don't deal much damage, and players will still miss them sometimes. As Rodney puts it, the goal was that the DM's monster roster expands and never contracts. On top of this, DMs don't need to feel pressure to create ever-increasing stakes for their players just because they level up. If they want to bring a hobgoblin-based campaign past level 10, they can do that. No need to send every adventure to the 9 hells just to keep things interesting. Conversely, lower-leveled players still have a chance to hit uber-powerful enemies, even if they won't deal much damage. The design goal here is interesting, as Rodney states it opens up new possibilities of encounter and adventure design, where repelling a dragon with dozens of town guards, for example, becomes a legitimate strategy rather than a pointless folly. This putative benefit is one of the most contentious of the bunch, but we'll get to that soon. Benefit number 4. It makes it easier for DMs to improvise. If you're a DM, you don't have to remember a whole table of scaling DCs and ACs to make sure your encounters are level appropriate. No matter the level, if the task is supposed to be hard, it's got a 20 DC. If it's meant to be medium, 15, and if it's supposed to be easy, it's a 10 DC. And the same goes for AC if you're a mad bastard who homebrews monsters in real time. Conversely, players can have a more intuitive understanding of their world based on DM descriptions rather than mechanical expectations. The example Rodney gives is that a DM can just describe a hobgoblin's chainmail armor, and the players can instinctively understand that it has around 15 AC once they've got some experience playing the game. Number 5. Realism. DCs being fixed values rather than needing to scale with player power levels makes the world feel more real. Even a mighty warrior can be struck by an arrow. Their level alone doesn't make them unhittable by half the monster manual. On the ability check side of things, you don't have to create this weird narrative thing where, for some reason, doors keep getting sturdier the higher the party's level, or similar nonsense like that. Number 6. It makes the game more ability focused rather than numbers focused. Or, as Rodney puts it, gaining levels grants the characters new capabilities, which go much farther toward making your character feel different than simple numerical increases. Bounded Accuracy places a greater emphasis on characters feeling unique because of the capabilities and features they have, instead of flat bonuses. The aim here is to lean into role-playing rather than number crunching as a way of expressing ever-increasing power levels. You never have to worry about keeping up with the assumed power level of your tier. By just playing your character and making normal, intuitive choices, you'll keep pace with the game's difficulty curve just fine. Benefit number 7, and this one's not from Rodney, it's for me. It makes advantage a big deal. Having advantage on a roll, rolling 2d20 and picking the highest, is a big deal in a system of bounded accuracy. It works out to between a +4 and +5 average result, which is a major swing. Advantage is also usually short-term or situation-specific, so it encourages players to look for tactical ways to gain the upper hand, rather than relying on a huge and consistent modifier. Again, this increases the emphasis on role-playing and being present in your fantasy environment, rather than automatically translating your White Room experiments into actual gameplay. Number 8. It gets everyone off the treadmill. This was a pejorative term in earlier editions, whereby players had to get certain numerical bonuses at certain levels if they wanted to, actually progress in the game. DMs were forced to shoehorn in appropriate magic items to make sure the next tier of play wasn't too challenging, rather than simply relying on players' natural level ups and attendant features to do that work for them. Disclaimer, I've never actually played 4th edition, so this is hearsay on my part. But in simple terms, there's no pressure on players to keep pace with certain numbers or else become useless. That's more beginner-friendly and more roleplay-friendly. This design choice is also a big reason why 5e assumes that players have no magic items with numerical bonuses at all. Much simpler to balance the game that way. And why magic items that do have numerical bonuses are usually small, but still significant, and why attunement exists as a limiting factor. Number 9. It makes rolling dice more impactful. In previous editions, one of your modifiers could be over 20, meaning your d20 die roll literally meant less than the number on your character sheet. In 5th edition, with a +11 max modifier under normal conditions, the result of a d20 almost always matters, barring some bounded accuracy game breakers like I discussed in my last video. Okay, so those are the things that bounded accuracy accomplishes, or what it's meant to accomplish anyway. Now I'll turn to the other side of the coin and look at common complaints about bounded accuracy in 5e. Because while bounded accuracy did fix many issues with earlier editions, it's not without flaws. Let's go over the most common gripes that players and DMs complain about with regard to bounded accuracy. Number 1. Your character doesn't get stronger in a satisfying way. Without proficiency in a skill or saving throw, your character is basically the same at 1st level as they are at 20th. Similarly, your AC doesn't really change much either after Tier 1 of play, barring magic armor. For example, a 4th level fighter in plate armor is rocking 18 AC. A 20th level fighter? Also 18 AC. At 4th level, enemies maybe have a +5 to hit, at 20th level, +10. That's a massive +5 progression, while your character's AC stay the same. You're pretty much guaranteed to get hit more often the more challenging monsters you face, and there's not much you can really do about it build-wise. And if you were unathletic at level 1 and don't have proficiency in athletics or a reason to invest in strength, you're going to be just as unathletic when you reach demigod levels of power. Basically, your attack rolls, AC, skill checks, and spell save DCs typically only go up by between 0 to 6 over the entirety of a campaign. Players' second biggest complaint about bounded accuracy is in the same vein, and that's that saving throws don't follow it, which breaks the system as a whole. Enemy spell and ability save DCs scale as they become more challenging, but your chance to shake them off, barring proficiency in the appropriate ability, becomes worse. Take a DC 19 Wisdom shutdown effect like an Ancient Dragon's Frightful Presence. If Wisdom is a dump stat for you, and it is for most melee characters, you don't really have the tools to cope with that. Bounded accuracy assumes that players' 2-hit chance increases at the same rate as enemies' defenses. but in failing to scale player defenses with ever-increasing spell save DCs, this assumption falls apart. Number 3. Experts can get shown up by mooks. For example, take a hard skill check to break a door down with a DC of 20. Your maxed out barbarian with a plus 11 athletics modifier succeeds on a 9 or higher, 60% of the time. That random NPC you brought along with a plus 1 modifier, they have a 10% chance of success. In other words, a complete door-smashing novice has a 4% chance of doing better than a near superhuman warrior. 4% may not be likely, but it's still too likely for some people's tastes. In this vein, people complain that verisimilitude, which was one of the stated goals of bounded accuracy, falls apart with examples like this. Number 4. Running swarms of low-level enemies is boring for everyone. While bounded accuracy allows for a DM to keep using goblins, if they want, as players reach higher levels, they're not a real threat unless their numbers are enormous. Fights are usually best, read most efficient and pleasurable, when they're over in 5 rounds or fewer. Fighting wave after wave of non-threatening enemies is not most players, or DMs' idea of a good time, meaning that low-level monsters do effectively get phased out as players level up, regardless of whether they're still technically viable. Alright, so that's the good and bad of bounded accuracy in a nutshell. Where do I fall in this debate? Well, for my money, bounded accuracy is more good than bad. The main selling point to me is the simplicity of a 0 to 30 difficulty system. I had never really thought about it until researching for these videos, but I improvise skill check DCs all the time, and I love that I can confidently use a 10 to 25 system from first level to the end of the game. I love that I can include low threat minions that are still enough of a threat that it forces players to make decisions. And I use minion rules for those, so players one-shot them, but they still have to use resources to do so. I don't particularly care that a first level newbie can technically land a hit on a god. Why would that scenario be happening anyway? From a player's perspective, I appreciate that I can always have an approximate and intuitive idea of an enemy's AC or a skill check's DC. I like that +1 magic items are a big deal, and there's no pressure to constantly find new and better ones. And to me, some of the complaints about bounded accuracy are kind of silly and based on untrue assumptions. Like, take the example of a wizard with a +11 arcana check who fails to know an important thing on, say, a DC 20 skill check. And then their dumb guy barbarian friend rolls a nat 20 and figures the whole thing out. Well, to me, the wizard with the +11 arcana shouldn't even be making a roll in that scenario. They invested fully in being an expert at that, and their passive arcana is a 21. Yes, passive skill scores exist across the board, not just for perception. That wizard should just auto-pass those difficult arcana checks, and the dumb guy barbarian shouldn't have a chance, even on a nat 20. That might be a controversial opinion, I don't know, let me know in the comments. But basically, my thinking is that if you're worried about swingy skill checks breaking verisimilitude, feel free to break in and prevent that from happening as the DM. On the other hand, the main point I agree with from the anti-bounded accuracy side of the argument is that saving throws ought to scale in some way with level, even without being proficient in them. It just doesn't feel right that a tanky frontliner has very few character build options for boosting their saving throws, which many of the most impactful monster abilities in the game rely on. I've seen a few good community ideas for addressing this issue, but homebrew and house rules are outside of the scope of this video. That's it, folks. Bounded accuracy is a fascinating and, I think, effective design principle. That's my opinion anyway. I'd love to hear what you think about it in the comments. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a boring topic of conversation altogether? If you watched a whole video on it, you probably don't think that, but maybe you're a masochist. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please consider doing the like and subscribe thing if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it. From D&D Lounge, may your die rolls always make it seem like your character breaks bounded accuracy, and best of luck in your next adventure.